I hid from my son that my monthly salary was $50,000, living modestly. So he had no idea. On Thanksgiving, he invited me to dinner with his wife's parents. I wanted to see how they would treat a poor man pretending to be a bankrupt old man. You won't believe what happened as soon as I crossed their threshold. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The tea kettle whistled as my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I sat down the audit report I'd been reviewing and glanced at the screen. Seth, I picked up. So yeah. Anyway, Dad. His voice came through mid-complaint, like I'd interrupted his real conversation. Beulah's parents want you to come for Thanksgiving dinner at their place Thursday at 6. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug. That's kind of them. I'd be happy to come. A pause. Seth hadn't expected easy agreement. Right. Well, good. Through the phone, I heard the familiar sounds of my own house. The house I'd bought 23 years ago. The house where Seth and Beulah had lived, rent-free for 8 years while saving up. The television murmured in the background. Seth cleared his throat. So, we found this house in Beaverton, he continued, his tone shifting to that particular flavor of stress I recognized. Perfect size, good neighborhood, $800,000. Problem is the down payment. We're short about $160,000. Banks these days, you know. I looked around my modest apartment, 1 bedroom, clean but sparse. Furniture from second-hand stores, strategically chosen. That's a significant amount. Yeah. Well, Seth's voice carried a shrug. Not like you'd have that kind of cash lying around anyway. My jaw tightened. I said nothing. Then Beulah's voice cut through. Not meant for me, but loud enough. Just tell the old man we need money. Wait, never mind. He's probably living on Social Security or something. Seth didn't defend me. Didn't pause. So anyway, Dad, you'll come Thursday, 6 o'clock sharp. I closed my eyes briefly. Government Accountability Office, Senior Auditor, $50,000 monthly salary, portfolio worth $2.3 million. The numbers ran through my mind like they did every time I reviewed my quarterly statements. 20 years ago, I'd made a choice. Raise Seth without the cushion of wealth. Let him build character. Learn self-reliance. Watch him become a man who earned his way. The irony burned. I'll be there, Seth. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. Don't worry about it. A pause. Then, actually, maybe don't park on the street. The Bakers have a nice neighborhood. Park around the corner or something. I opened my eyes, stared at my reflection in the darkened window overlooking Portland's downtown streets. The man looking back at me was 62. Fit, methodical. A man who'd spent decades analyzing financial misconduct, finding patterns others missed. I won't be late, I said, my voice deliberately even. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, bye. He hung up without waiting for response. I set the phone down carefully. The apartment settled into silence around me. The hum of the refrigerator, distant traffic, my own breathing. Strategic poverty, I'd called it once in my mind. This place cost me $900 a month when I could afford 10 times that. The used Camry in the parking garage, instead of the Mercedes I considered, Goodwill suits and drugstore reading glasses. Also, Seth would learn what it meant to work for something. I walked to the bookshelf and picked up a framed photo. Seth at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a certificate from his school spelling bee. Best dad. He'd written on the back in careful pencil. I remembered that day. How proud he'd been. How hard he'd worked on those words. When had that boy become the man who told me to park around the corner? I set the photo down and moved to my desk. Years of auditing had trained me for documentation. I opened my laptop, created a new file, titled it simply Thanksgiving 2024. Date, November 18th, Monday evening, 7:43 p.m. Call from Seth Stewart. Duration, approximately 4 minutes. Content, Thanksgiving invitation. Request for $160K indirect. Dismissive comments. I typed it all. Fingers steady on the keys. What was said? What was implied? What I'd overheard? Beulah's voice. Seth's silence. The casual cruelty of assuming I had nothing because I appeared to have nothing. An audit always started with the initial evidence. the first anomaly that suggested deeper problems. This was my first entry. I saved the document and stood, walked to my closet, and opened the door. The suits I wore to the office hung on the left, tailored, professional, appropriate for a GS-15 senior auditor. On the right, pushed to the back, the older clothes, the worn jacket I'd bought on sale 15 years ago, the shoes with heels that needed replacing. I needed to see the truth before deciding anything. Needed to know who my son had become when he thought his father had nothing to offer. My hand moved past the good suits, reached for the back of the rack. Thursday was 3 days away. I'd attend this dinner. I'd play the role they'd assigned me. The poor, embarrassing father who couldn't park on their nice street. And I'd watch, listen, document. Then I'd decide whether my son was worth saving. I pulled out the old jacket, held it up to the light. A small stain on the lapel I'd never quite gotten out. A button that didn't quite match the others where I'd replaced it. Perfect. I laid it across the chair in my bedroom and returned to the window. Portland's lights stretched below. Tiny lives in tiny apartments. Everyone carrying their own calculations of worth and dignity. My phone sat silent on the counter. The tea had gone cold. I thought about that 7-year-old boy with the spelling bee certificate. Wondered when he'd stop seeing me and started seeing only what I appeared to lack. Thursday would answer that question. I opened my closet again and looked at the suits I never wore around Seth. Then I pushed them aside and reached for the back of the rack. The old jacket smelled faintly of mothballs. Monday morning light filtered through my apartment windows as I examined the fabric worn at the elbows. The color faded from charcoal to something closer to ash. I'd worn it to a budget committee meeting 9 years ago, back before my promotions, before the salary bumps that had built my portfolio into something substantial. It would do nicely. I hung it on the back of my desk chair and dressed in my usual work attire. 40 minutes later, I was in my Camry, deliberately driving the route that took me past my real house. The house stood in a quiet Portland suburb, modest by neighborhood standards, but solid. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, built in 1998. I'd bought it for $400,000. Current value pushed $650,000. The lawn needed mowing. Seth's Honda sat in the driveway next to Beulah's Lexus, my house, their home. 8 years ago, newlywed Seth had called me. Dad, I know this is a lot to ask, but could Beulah and I stay at your place for a few months, just until we save up for our own house? I'd said yes immediately. Of course, son. Stay as long as you need. It's your home, too. We'll pay rent, obviously, he'd added. Don't worry about that. Save your money for your future. 8 years of saving. 8 years rent-free in a house worth more than $500,000. And still they were $160,000 short. I drove on, mind working through the numbers like I worked through discrepancies in federal budget reports. Seth's job at the marketing firm paid $70,000 annually. Beulah managed a boutique fitness studio, probably pulled in $50,000. Combined income of $10,000 monthly, 0 rent, 0 mortgage. 8 years meant $960,000 had flowed through their accounts. Where had it gone? The Lexus in my driveway, probably. The narrator is conducting a final audit of his son, Seth, and his in-laws, the Bakers, by pretending to be a poor, retired man to test his son's character. He documents the dismissive behavior and prepares for the Thanksgiving dinner, where the final evidence of his son's values will be revealed. The narrator, Roland, and a GS-15 senior auditor with a $50,000 monthly salary and a $2.3 million portfolio, meticulously documents his son Seth's behavior, treating the situation like a financial investigation. Initial baseline. 20 years ago, Roland chose to raise Seth, without the cushion of wealth, to teach him independence and self-reliance. The anomaly. Current Seth and Beulah live rent-free in Roland's paid-off house, worth over $650,000, for 8 years, but are still $160,000 short for a down payment. They casually assume Roland has no money, probably living on Social Security. Seth's instruction. Roland is told to park around the corner or something, so his $3,000 used Camry doesn't embarrass them in the nice neighborhood. Seth's request. Seth calls to request he dress nicely. I mean, as nice as you can, confirming his concern over Roland's appearance. The in-laws narrative, the reframing the Bakers, who live in a $2.5 million mansion, maintain a narrative that Roland's poverty is an admirable choice, a life philosophy of minimalism, rather than a lack of means. This allows them to feel superior without feeling guilty. Roland carries out the final steps of his investigation, adopting the guise of the poor, embarrassing father for the Thanksgiving dinner. Roland drives his 15-year-old, 180,000-mile Camry to the Bakers' imposing West Lynn estate. He follows Seth's instruction and parks 2 houses down on the street. Upon arriving, the interactions confirm Roland's documentation. Seth's reaction. He greets his father with an expression tight and glances dismissively at the $7 store-bought pumpkin pie. Dwight Baker, the host, he gives a firm, territorial handshake and immediately references the car. Still driving that old Toyota? They really do last forever, don't they? Asterisk asterisk. Patricia Baker, the wife, she offers practiced sympathy, calling Roland's appearance, "How practical." Seth says, "You've always been about practicality." Beulah, Seth's wife, she stands rigid with embarrassment and contempt, muttering, "More like necessity, Mom." Dwight then seats Roland in a leather chair, in the corner away from the main seating area, and condescendingly offers him a drink before deciding on water. Water it is. Roland is now in position to gather the final data points before drawing a conclusion on whether his son, who has benefited from 8 years of his father's generosity, is worth saving. He poured himself 3 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "So, Roland, government work. You're at some agency downtown. The Government Accountability Office. I audit federal spending." Dwight laughed, a booming sound that demanded attention. "Ah, bureaucrat. Well, someone has to do it, I suppose. The pay must be adequate. It meets my needs." Patricia settled onto the sofa, crossing her legs. "Such important work. I'm sure public service is so admirable when people don't have other options." I sipped my water, said nothing. Seth sat beside Beulah on the love seat, his posture rigid, avoiding my gaze. "Tell me." Dwight continued swirling his scotch. "What happened? You must have had ambitions when you were younger. Plans for something more." I chose my path deliberately. "Interesting choice." His tone suggested otherwise. I went the opposite direction. Started selling cars at 22. Owned my first dealership at 30. Now I've got $3 million revenue stream. Different philosophies, I suppose. Dinner was served in a dining room with a table that could seat 12. The meal was catered. Wine that probably costs more per bottle than my monthly electric bill. They'd placed me at the far end, a cheap folding chair brought in to accommodate the extra guest. My store-bought pie sat on the sideboard, ignored beside an elaborate selection of professional desserts. Dwight dominated the conversation, gesturing with his fork, refilling his own glass repeatedly. "Just closed the deal on my 3rd dealership last month. Seth, you really should come work for me. Real money in automotive sales. Not like that tech stuff." "I'm doing okay in tech, Dwight." Patricia dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. "Better than some family examples, certainly." She glanced at me, her meaning clear. "Seth has always been capable," I said quietly. Beulah's fork clinked against her plate. Capable, but held back. Some people inherit advantages. Seth had to build everything himself. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so painful. Seth had inherited a house 8 years rent-free. Every advantage I could provide without revealing my resources. And still they believe this narrative. "Must be difficult," Patricia continued. "Making ends meet on a government salary. Do you have savings, retirement accounts?" "I'm adequately prepared." Dwight leaned forward. "But not enough to help with major expenses, I'd imagine." "Seth mentioned you two found a house. $800,000. Beautiful area, Beaverton. You need what? $160 for the down payment." Seth nodded. "Yes, sir. We're working on it." "What about family help?" Dwight turned to me. "Roland, can you contribute?" The moment crystallized. I felt Seth's eyes on me, waiting for me to confirm what he'd already told them, that I had nothing to offer. "That's a significant sum," I said. "That's what I thought." Dwight's smile was triumphant. No offense, but government work doesn't exactly build wealth, does it? Can't squeeze blood from a stone. Seth sat silent. Not a word in my defense. Not even a token protest against Dwight's condescension. Beulah set down her wine glass. We've learned to be realistic about what's possible from different sources. Well then. Dwight stood, walked to Seth's chair, placed a hand on his shoulder. Tell you what, Patricia and I will provide the $160,000 down payment. Gift from us. Can't have our daughter wait on forever for help that clearly isn't coming from elsewhere. Seth's face transformed. Dwight, that's incredibly generous. Thank you. Beulah rose to hug her father. Thank you, Daddy. This is why I'm grateful for real family support. Patricia beamed. Some families help their children succeed. That's what parents do when they're able. I watched my son accept another man as his benefactor. Watched him show more gratitude to Dwight in 30 seconds than he'd shown me in 8 years. That's very generous of you both, I said, my tone perfectly neutral. We moved through dessert, their elaborate pastries, not my pie. Conversation continued around me like I was furniture. At 9 o'clock, I stood. Thank you for the meal. I should be going. Dwight barely looked up. Early night. Well, long drive back to. Where are you living these days? Downtown. Small place. Cozy, I'm sure. Patricia's smile was dismissive. Good night, Roland. Seth rose halfway, then settled back. Bye, Dad. Not let me walk you out. Not drive safely. Just a quick dismissal, eager to return to his real family. Goodbye, Seth. I paused at the doorway. Enjoy your new house. I walked to my Camry alone. I sat in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, but not turning it. My hands were steady, my breathing even. The auditor in me was already organizing the evening into categories, documenting evidence, building the case file. 8 years rent-free in my house. Tonight's complete betrayal. Dwight's hand on Seth's shoulder, claiming him. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In my rear-view mirror, the Baker mansion blazed with light and laughter. I'd seen enough. The drive back took longer than usual. My mind was working, sorting, categorizing. Not anger, something colder. I reached my apartment at 10:47. I unlocked my door and moved directly to my desk. Documentation first, always. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd started Monday. Added a new entry. November 21st, Thursday, 6 p.m. 9 p.m. location, Baker Residence, West Lynn. Present, Dwight Baker, Patricia Baker, Seth Stewart, Beulah Stewart, Roland Stewart. I typed everything. Dwight's comments about my car. Patricia's questions about my finances. Beulah's contempt. Seth's silence. The down payment offer, Seth's gratitude. Not to me. Never to me. But to the man who'd spent the evening systematically diminishing everything I was. The words filled 3 pages, clinical, precise. The way I'd write an audit report on financial malfeasance. When I finished, it was past midnight. I saved the document, backed it up to 3 separate drives, then sat back in my chair. 20 years of deliberately living beneath my means. Teaching Seth independence. 8 years of free housing while he saved nothing. Tonight's complete betrayal. I pulled up my financial management software. Government Accountability Office salary, $50,000 monthly. 23 years at this level. Total liquid assets, $1,337,000. The house where Seth lived rent-free, $650,000 current value. Mortgage paid off 12 years ago. Total assets, for $1 million. I stared at the numbers. For $1 million my son thought didn't exist. For $1 million that could have prevented the night's humiliation with a single sentence. But I'd wanted to know who he really was. Now I did. Friday morning arrived with gray rain. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop again. First search, Oregon inheritance law. Disinheritance children. The results were clear. Oregon allowed complete disinheritance. No requirement to leave anything to adult children. A properly executed will with explicit language would suffice. Second search, Oregon eviction law. Family members. More complex. 30 days notice minimum. Legal occupation for 8 years might create complications. I need an attorney. Third search, transfer on death deed. Oregon. Perfect. A Todd deed would transfer property ownership upon my death directly to named beneficiaries, bypassing probate. Could be revoked or changed anytime while I lived. Seth wouldn't inherit the house automatically. I could name anyone, any organization, any charity. He'd have nothing. I spent the afternoon organizing documents. Property deed, tax records, financial statements. The 8 years of documentation showing Seth had lived rent-free, paying zero toward the mortgage, utilities, maintenance. His income tax returns I'd helped him file until 3 years ago, showing his substantial earnings. The rain intensified. By evening, I had the framework, two-pronged approach, both legally sound. One new will, explicitly disinheriting Seth, with clear language explaining why. Everything to charity, perhaps organizations supporting foster children, or educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, kids who actually needed help, unlike my son, who'd squandered 8 years of advantages. 2. Transfer on death deed for the house, also to charity, or perhaps sold with proceeds to charity. Seth would need to vacate within 30 days of my death. But first, I needed him out while I was still alive. Saturday morning, I dressed casually and drove past my house. Seth's Honda was in the driveway, Beulah's Lexus beside it, lights on in the kitchen. They were home, probably discussing their new house, celebrating Dwight's generosity. My house, my equity, my gift turned into a weapon against me. I drove back to my apartment and made a phone call to a colleague who'd gone through a messy divorce. Marcus, it's Roland. I need an attorney recommendation. Real estate and inheritance law. Marcus recommended Vernon Price. I wrote it down and opened my email. Vernon Price's website was professional. I drafted the email carefully. Subject, consultation request. Estate planning and property matter. Mr. Price, I am seeking legal counsel regarding estate planning and a property matter involving family occupation. I am a 64-year-old federal employee with substantial assets and real property. I need to execute a comprehensive will, establish a transfer on death deed, and address the current occupation of my primary residence by family members. I have documentation prepared and am ready to proceed quickly. Please advise your availability for an initial consultation. Regards, Roland Stewart. I read it twice, checked for typos, and hit send. I sat back in my chair. I'd spent 40 years building financial security, 20 years hiding it to teach my son independence, 8 years providing free housing while he saved nothing and learned to despise me for appearing to have nothing. Last night, he'd sat silent while another man paid for his future. This morning, I'd started the process of removing every advantage I'd ever given him. I opened my financial software again, looked at the numbers one more time. For $1 million. 40 years of careful planning. None of it would ever reach Seth. I pulled up the file with my documentation. 3 parts now, chronological, detailed, damning. Printed it. 3 copies. Put them in separate folders. 1 for my records, 1 for the attorney, 1 for backup. By noon, I'd organized everything an attorney would need. The plan was simple, legally airtight, morally justified. Seth had made his choice. Now I'd make mine. The weekend passed in careful preparation. When Vernon Price's assistant called Monday afternoon with an appointment slot for Wednesday morning, I was ready. Wednesday arrived cold and clear. Vernon Price's office occupied 2 floors of a glass-fronted building. Vernon met me in the conference room. Mr. Stewart, thank you for coming in. I understand that you need estate planning assistance. I set my leather portfolio on the table and opened it. I need to disinherit my son completely and permanently. Can Oregon law accomplish this? Yes, it can. Oregon doesn't require parents to leave anything to adult children. He sat across from me. Pen ready. Tell me the situation. I removed my documentation. First the handwritten notes from Thanksgiving. Then bank statements showing my accounts. Property deed for the house. Current will leaving everything to Seth. Retirement summaries. I arranged them in organized stacks between us. My son showed me who he is when he thought I had nothing. Now that I'm certain of his character, he'll receive nothing. Vernon read through my documentation methodically. You have substantial assets. The house alone is worth $650,000, paid off 12 years ago. My son has lived there rent-free for 8 years, while accumulating zero savings and learning to be embarrassed by me. I see. Vernon set the deed aside. And your liquid assets? $1.2 million in savings and investments, $800,000 in retirement accounts. I slid another document across. This shows his income over those 8 years. Combined with his wife's earnings, they should have saved over $1 million. They have nothing. Vernon nodded slowly. You want this airtight. No loopholes, no opportunities for reversal. He pulled out a legal pad and began outlining options for the house. Todd was cleaner, faster, harder to challenge. Property would automatically transfer to my chosen beneficiary upon death, bypassing probate entirely. For liquid assets, a new will was straightforward. Name any beneficiary. Include explicit disinheritance language. Who receives your estate? Vernon asked. I considered this over the weekend. No family alternatives. I had no siblings. My parents long deceased. I want the money to go to children who actually need it. Kids from families without resources. The Portland Education Foundation provides scholarships to low-income students. Reputable, established, perfect for estate gifts. That works. Children who have nothing will benefit from what my son took for granted. Vernon allowed himself a slight smile. There's a certain poetry to that choice. There's justice to it. He outlined the timeline. Draft new will 1 week. Prepare TOD deed 1 week. Notarization required. Property appraisal recommended. Total timeline. 2 weeks to complete all documents. I nodded. My annual federal employee health assessments are current. All normal, no cognitive issues. Perfect. Bring those records to the signing. Over the next 2 weeks, I became intimately familiar with the process. I requested specific language changes, clarifications, additional provisions. The property appraisal required coordination. I called Seth on a Tuesday evening. Seth, I'm having the house appraised next Tuesday. The appraiser will need access. Appraised? Why? Insurance purposes. Routine property valuation. Will you be home? No, I'll be at work. Beulah might be here. This seems sudden. It's overdue. Okay, I guess that's fine. Kevin Murphy conducted the appraisal on schedule. Walking through the house felt strange. Seth's furniture, Beulah's decorative choices, their lives built in my space without payment or appreciation. The appraisal came back at $650,000, fair market value. By mid-December, all documents were ready. Vernon scheduled the signing for a Wednesday afternoon. Joyce Hartman's notary office. 2 witnesses, law firm staff, stood against the wall. Joyce reviewed my federal ID badge. She slid the new will across the desk. Mr. Stewart, I need to verify you understand these documents. This will revoke all prior wills and directs your entire estate to the Portland Education Foundation. Do you understand? Completely. And this deed transfers your property to the same foundation upon your death. Your son, currently residing there, is not a beneficiary. You understand this? I do. That's my intention. I signed with deliberate strokes. The pen moved smoothly across the pages. Then the TOD deed. Joyce supplied her seal. The stamp made a definitive sound that echoed in the quiet room. These are now in effect. The TOD deed needs county recording. The next morning, I personally walked the recorded TOD deed to the Multnomah County Recording Office. I wanted to see it entered into public record myself. The clerk processed it efficiently, provided a stamped copy with the official recording number. Real now, permanent. The house would never be Seth's. That afternoon, I returned to Vernon's office for our final meeting. All documents are executed and recorded, he confirmed. Your estate plan is now in effect. When do you plan to inform your son? Soon, after the holidays. I want him to enjoy one more Christmas, believing he's getting millions. Vernon leaned back in his chair. That's actually remarkably restrained. Most clients in your situation act immediately. I'm not acting from rage. I'm acting from certainty. A few more weeks won't change anything. Christmas came and went. Seth sent a brief text. Generic holiday wishes. I spent Christmas Day organizing my files. By early January, I was ready. I texted Seth in early January. Need to speak with you. Coffee Wednesday afternoon, downtown cafe on 3rd. His response came hours later. Sure. What's this about? Better in person. Wednesday arrived gray with rain. I reached the cafe first, selected a corner table, ordered black coffee, watched the street until Seth appeared. He sat across from me, confusion evident. What's going on? You sounded serious. I sipped my coffee. I want to tell you about something I did 20 years ago. A decision about how to raise you. Seth frowned. Okay. When you were 15, I made approximately $200,000 annually as a senior federal auditor. I had a substantial investment portfolio, significant savings, real assets. I could have given you anything. Instead, I chose to live modestly. Let you believe we had limited resources. I wanted you to learn independence, self-reliance, the value of work. I set down my cup. I wanted to see who you'd become without the cushion of obvious wealth. Seth's expression shifted, uncertain now. What are you saying? I'm saying I currently have $1.2 million in savings and investments, $800,000 in retirement accounts. I own the house where you live. $650,000 paid off. Total assets approximately $4 million. The color drained completely from his face. You're joking. I'm telling you the truth I've hidden for 2 decades. The poverty you've been embarrassed by. Strategic. The modest apartment, the old car, the worn suits. Choices, not necessities. His hands gripped the table edge. Why would you? To see who you'd become. To understand your character when you thought I had nothing. I kept my voice level. Thanksgiving showed me everything I needed to know. Thanksgiving? That was you accepting another man's money without defending your father. That was you sitting silent while the bakers systematically humiliated me. That was you telling me to park around the corner because my car was embarrassing. Seth's mouth opened, closed. I didn't. You did. And I documented it. Every word, every silence, every moment of betrayal. I removed an envelope from my jacket. 2 weeks ago, I completed new estate documents. A will disinheriting you completely. A transfer on death deed, removing you as beneficiary of the house. Everything goes to the Portland Education Foundation. Scholarships for children from low-income families. I slid the envelope across. These are copies. The originals are executed, notarized, and recorded with Multnomah County. Legally binding. Seth stared at the envelope like it contained poison. You can't. I can. Oregon law allows complete disinheritance of adult children. Vernon Price, my attorney, ensured everything is legally airtight. You showed me who you are, Seth. Now you'll receive the inheritance you've earned. Nothing. His hands shook as he scanned the documents. This is because of Thanksgiving. Because I didn't defend you enough. That's insane. It's because of 8 years rent-free in my house. Because of every dismissive comment, every embarrassed glance. Every moment you treated me like a failure. Thanksgiving wasn't the cause. It was the confirmation. Dad, please. I've lived in a $900 apartment while you enjoyed $650,000 of my equity. You had every advantage and learned only contempt. Seth's breathing quickened. I didn't know. How could I know if you never told me? Your ignorance of my resources doesn't excuse your treatment of who you thought I was. You accepted Dwight's money over having any relationship with a father you believed was poor. That tells me everything about your values. I can change. You're 32. Old enough to know better. Old enough to have shown basic respect regardless of my perceived finances. He answered his phone. Beulah's voice was shrill. He just told me he's got $4 million. No, I didn't know. Of course I didn't. Seth's expression crumbled. He already did it. Legal documents recorded everything. I need to go home, he said finally. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to discuss. The documents are filed. My decision is final. You can spend your savings on legal fees if you want. You'll lose. Seth stood, swaying slightly. How can you do this? I'm your son. And you showed me exactly what that means to you. The house is mine. The money is mine. None of it was ever yours. You made your choices. Now live with them. I left the cafe. 10 days after the cafe meeting, Roland received a certified letter containing a legal filing from Harrison and Cole, a prominent Portland law firm. Plaintiff, Seth Stewart. Action. Contest of last will and testament. Claims. Diminished capacity, undue influence, emotional instability due to sudden disinheritance. Roland immediately hired Vernon Price, who dismissed the filing as a Hail Mary pass, intended to intimidate Roland into a settlement. Vernon noted the likely financial backer, Dwight Baker, Seth's father-in-law, who was used to buying outcomes. Roland provided Vernon with a fortress of documentation to counter the claims. Security clearance renewal/psychological screening. Annual physical exam results, all normal. GAO performance reviews, consistently excellent. Written analysis of Seth's behavior since Thanksgiving. Vernon filed a counter-motion, asserting that Roland's actions were those of a competent adult making informed decisions over multiple weeks, not someone with diminished capacity. During the legal proceedings, the attempts to manipulate Roland intensified. Seth's letters. Seth sent multiple handwritten letters expressing rambling apology, referencing shared memories, like riding a bike, and promising to be better. Roland filed them but did not respond, recognizing the manipulation. Dwight Baker's offer. Dwight called, attempting to negotiate a settlement, saying, "Everyone has a price. Name the amount you want for yourself, and we'll settle this." Roland rejected the attempt, stating, "This isn't about money, Mr. Baker. It's about character." He recorded the call and sent it to Vernon. Beulah's call. Beulah called for the first time, attempting a false reconciliation. "We're family. Families shouldn't fight like this." Roland countered, "We became strangers at Thanksgiving. This call doesn't change that." After she called 3 more times, Roland blocked her number. The hearing was scheduled for late February. Roland dressed in his professional work suit. Vernon met him outside the courtroom. The instruction was clear. "Stay calm. Show them exactly who you are," he advised. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Seth sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a woman in her 40s. Beulah sat in the gallery behind them. Dwight wasn't present. Seth's attorney argued Roland's sudden disinheritance indicated emotional disturbance, suggesting he'd been influenced. Vernon countered with documentation. "My employment records and security clearance renewal requiring psychological screening. Annual physicals and performance reviews, all normal/excellent. My handwritten notes from Thanksgiving, dated and detailed. Mr. Stewart is a senior federal auditor," Vernon stated. "He has documented his reasoning clearly. He planned this estate change methodically over months. This is textbook competence." Judge Morrison reviewed the materials, then looked at me. "Mr. Stewart, you changed your will after 40 years. Can you explain this decision?" I met her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. I kept my financial status private to teach my son independence. At Thanksgiving, I learned how he treats people he believes have nothing. His character, when tested, was found wanting." This seems like a harsh response to a single dinner. It wasn't a single dinner, Your Honor. It was 8 years of taking without gratitude, culminating in one evening, where he showed his true values. I documented everything. Finally, she looked up. "I've reviewed the evidence. Mr. Stewart is clearly competent. He has documented his reasoning. Oregon law permits disinheritance. The will stands as executed. Challenge dismissed." Seth's face crumbled. Outside the courthouse, Seth called across the lobby. "Dad, please just talk to me. 5 minutes." I paused for 1 second, then continued walking. The legal challenge had failed. Dwight's money had bought them nothing but expensive legal fees. 3 weeks after the court victory, I called Vernon Price. "I want to reclaim my house." Vernon confirmed the process. 60-day notice for no-cause termination of tenancy, followed by filing for eviction if they didn't vacate. Vernon prepared the document, Notice to terminate tenancy. Effective April 1st, Seth had 60 days to vacate. On April 1st, I drove to my house. Beulah answered the door. I handed her the envelope. 60 days to vacate. You and Seth need to be out by June 1st. Her face went white. Vacate. This is Seth's house. This is my house. I bought it 23 years ago. Paid it off 12 years ago. Seth has lived here rent-free by my permission, which I'm now withdrawing. You can't just kick us out. We have rights. You have 60 days. Read the notice. It explains everything. Dwight will fight this. Dwight's money couldn't overturn the will. It won't stop a property owner from reclaiming his own house. June 1st, be out. I walked to my car, documenting the visit. Vernon filed the forcible entry and detainer action in mid-April. The court scheduled a hearing for mid-May. The hearing was procedural and quick. I presented the deed, the lack of rent payment or lease, and the notice. Seth's new, less expensive attorney argued 8 years created tenancy rights. Judge Reynolds rejected it immediately. No lease, no rent, no documentation of any rental agreement. This is permissive occupancy, which the owner can terminate. 60-day notice was proper. I'm ordering the tenants to vacate by June 1st or face forcible removal. Outside, Seth approached me. Where are we supposed to go? I unlocked my car door. That's not my concern. We can't afford first and last month's rent on a decent place. Not with the down payment gone to Dwight's lawyers. You had 8 years of free housing to save money. You saved nothing. Those are your choices, Seth. Live with them. You're enjoying this. Watching us suffer. I'm not enjoying it. I'm implementing it. There's a difference. The days crawled toward June 1st. I heard they found a cramped, less desirable 2-bedroom apartment, renting for $2,200 monthly. Dwight had apparently tired of funding their legal losses. June 1st arrived. I drove to the house at noon. A moving truck sat in the driveway. I parked on the street and waited. The moving truck departed at 2. Seth's Honda followed it. Beulah's Lexus left minutes later. I waited another hour, then approached the house. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was empty except for scuff marks on the floors, nail holes in the walls, the ghost impressions of furniture on the carpet. They'd taken everything, left nothing. In the master bedroom, I found a note on the floor. Seth's handwriting. You won. Are you happy now? I picked it up, read it twice, then put it in my pocket. I wasn't happy. Happiness wasn't the goal. Justice was the goal. Consequences were the goal. Teaching that free housing and inherited wealth weren't rights, but privileges that could be withdrawn. I locked all the doors. The house was secure. Empty. Mine again. Before the June 1st deadline, Seth made one final attempt to negotiate. On a Tuesday evening in late May, Seth appeared at my apartment door, looking diminished. Worn clothing, tired eyes, shoulders curved inward. Seth's request. We need 2 more weeks. Their new apartment was not ready until mid-June, and the legal fees from fighting the will had wiped out their savings. Dwight's withdrawal. Seth admitted that Dwight gave them $50,000, but had withdrawn further support, saying I was too stubborn, and we're on our own now. Beulah's reaction. Seth revealed Beulah blames me for everything. She says I should have known you had money, that I should have fixed this. She calls me a failure daily. Roland's response. I pointed out that Beulah was using the same words she used about me at Thanksgiving, and that Seth now understood what silence costs. Regarding the extension, I gave you 8 years. The answer is no. The court order says June 1st. That deadline stands. Seth's departure. Seth admitted he came to see if there's anything left between us worth saving. I replied. Thanksgiving answered that question. He left, offering a final apology. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not about losing the money. About disappointing you. I monitored the move-out process. On May 30th, I watched from my car as Seth and Beulah made their final trips. May 30th, Seth texted. We're out. House is empty. Keys are on kitchen counter. June 1st, I drove to the house. The keys were on the counter. In the master bedroom, I found a small framed photo of Seth and Beulah on their wedding day. I set it on the windowsill. I got in my car and drove back to my apartment. The house was mine again. The inheritance was secured. The legal battles were over. The education was complete. The consequences delivered. The justice achieved. I made dinner, ate at my small table, and felt something I hadn't felt since before Thanksgiving: peace. Satisfied, not happy, not triumphant, just finished. The story had reached its natural conclusion. June passed into July. I returned to my full work routine at the GAO. Completed the quarterly audit reports. My colleagues noticed nothing different about me. I was the same senior auditor, methodical, thorough, reliable. The house stood empty through June while I consulted with a real estate agent. Market value had held steady at $650,000. I listed it in early July, and it sold within 3 weeks. Cash buyer, no complications. Closing netted me $640,000. I never visited the house again after June 1st. I signed documents in Vernon Price's office and accepted the check. I decided weeks earlier where the proceeds would go. I scheduled a meeting with Margaret Chin, the director of the Portland Education Foundation. The donation: I explained my intention to donate the proceeds from the property sale, $640,000, for college scholarships for low-income students, full 4-year funding. The impact: Margaret confirmed the amount could fund approximately 15 full scholarships. The condition: my name would remain confidential. No publicity, no recognition. The scholarships would be based purely on need and merit. Roland's reasoning: I believe in giving opportunities to young people who will appreciate them. Students who understand the value of education because they've had to fight for it. I signed the donation paperwork and transferred the funds. $640,000 redirected from a son who'd wasted advantages to 15 students who'd earned them. 3 weeks later, I received a formal acknowledgement, including brief descriptions of the recipients: first-generation college students, foster care survivors, children of single parents working multiple jobs, young people who understood struggle and valued opportunity. I filed the letter and didn't look at it again. September brought routine. I heard nothing from Seth. The silence was mutual and appropriate. Through indirect channels, I learned fragments. Seth and Beulah were in their small apartment, marriage strained but intact. They paid their rent, managed their bills, lived without safety nets or wealthy benefactors. They were learning what independence actually meant. I felt no satisfaction hearing this, no triumph, just confirmation that consequences were real and being faced. A colleague, Marcus, noted I seemed more settled. I had removed toxic relationships, enforced boundaries, and ensured my resources would serve worthy purposes. My life was now lived on my terms, by my values. The will was filed, legally sound, court-tested. The house was sold, and the proceeds were donated. 15 students would begin college next fall with full funding. I had given Seth 20 years of hidden advantages, 8 years of free housing, and 3 months showing him consequences. The education was complete, the account settled, the audit complete. The rest was simply living. The story is now complete. If you would like to listen to another story, please click on the box on the right, as the narrator suggests, or let me know what else you would like to do.